Hi, my name's Leighton Jin. I'm the Director of Development for the American Documentary and Animation Film Festival, also known as AmDocs. I have a very special interview today, and this is just going to be great. We've added the pursuit of equality, and we have two main figures in the film, but also two main figures in that civil rights battle. Polly Cooper, Jeanne Rizzo. Have I pronounced them both right? I tend to
Perfect.
struggle. Well, I think we were talking earlier before we went on. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years. Can you talk to me what it's like to celebrate 20 years of this film and what you guys have gone through and your long marriage?
Thank you.
Well, we had already been together about 15 years. We're raising my son. We got together when he was 9. And when Gavin Newsom decided to start marrying gay people in February of 2004, we were traveling at the time, so we made an appointment for March 11th. That was the next available one. And we all were wondering, are the courts going to shut this down? Are they going to shut it down? And they didn't. They hadn't, right? It had already been through a couple of court battles and nobody shut it down. So on March 11th, we were planning then a big wedding. We had 50 friends and family. Our son and Polly's sister were our witnesses. And we got to City Hall and we're standing outside, and all of a sudden we see all these cameras rushing in, news people rushing into City Hall. And we thought somebody famous is getting married. And then somebody got a phone call that said, no, they're shutting it down. And the two of us ran down the hall to the clerk's office. We had our paperwork, and we got there, and everybody was crying, and people were walking away. And the sign was going up that said, by order of the Superior Court, the Supreme Court, the marriages, same sex couples can't get married anymore. But we knew that we had to stand up and be formally denied. It felt like we had to put a face on it. And so, with our son, the three of us walked up to the counter to be formally denied. And then all the cameras went off. And next thing we knew, we were at a press conference with the mayor. And by the next morning, we were plaintiffs in the marriage case, in the California marriage case. And the energy of all that, of the weddings that were so exciting in San Francisco, was alive and exciting. That's all in the film. And then our being denied really shut the door on it. And the film takes you through our journey as a family, our journey in the courts, Gavin's steadfast, the city attorney working through the court cases, and National Center for Lesbian Rights, Lambda Legal, private law firms. Everybody came forward to be our representatives. So we went through 4 years of court battles before the California Supreme Court ruled. And then we were able to get married actually on March 11th.
No, we got married
2008.
No,
Yeah.
we got married in September.
We got married in September, but on March 11th, we were denied. Yes, thank you. And we were able to get married. And so it was quite an emotional journey for us to go to court, to go through the protest lines every time there was a court battle. And Pali talks about the attorneys that from the other side that were really so vitriolic during the court proceedings.
Well, the whole thing in San Francisco, if you think about 20 years ago, it's hard to believe, but when Gavin Newsom opened up the door to same-sex couples, thousands of people showed up. So for that first month, they called it the Winter of Love, which we'll talk about. People came from different parts of California. It was thrilling. Magic. It was so exciting, and people gave up their vacations so that they could come and help marry people. People were sending flowers from the heartland. There was a story about some people that were watching the news in San Francisco and Ohio, and they wanted to do something. And so they sent flowers, and people were like, I didn't order flowers. They're like, no, this is from Mary in Ohio. She just wanted to say congratulations. So, that was the joy part, but actually standing there when that sign went up was pretty powerful, because you don't really think of it that day to day, but when you when we saw that so publicly and so officially, it was like, okay, we were there for a reason, and we need to actually be part of this effort to overthrow this. And so the number of brilliant people that stepped in to really like take this case, it was a matter of civil rights. And they had a wonderful team of people. When we listened to our case argued in the Superior Court, it was like a lesson in history about civil rights. It was beautifully articulated, well referenced. I was so proud to be part of it, because when the other side had their arguments, there really wasn't an argument other than, I don't really like gay people, but gay people can't procreate, and I'm afraid it'll be the end. And I realized there was a lot of fear, but the fear was really based on really nothing. So that was the first Superior Court. Judge Kramer, who was the Republican appointed Catholic judge who heard that case, ruled unequivocally in our favor. And when we were able to meet him last month at a screening at the Castro, he said, Judge Kramer, thank you so much for your opinion. And he said, it really wasn't that hard. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question about this. The thing that strikes me about all this, because everything that happened that day is an amazing roller coaster of emotions you had to go through. But can you talk to me about the moment of clarity you had to make sure you were right there, making sure that you were the face and denial? Because some people, when you're going through that and emotion, disappointment, I think people would be able to focus, but it sounded like you both had a real focus in making sure you were there, you were denied, and then you guys became the face of this movement.
Well,
Was
I
there?
think, yeah, I think, both of us have been involved in advocacy in some way or another. At the time I was working for a breast cancer organization. Pali is a chiropractor, but we've been involved in various social justice issues, civil rights. And I was actually thinking about one of my iconic heroes, Bernice Regan from Sweet Honey in the Rock, who's a civil rights leader. And she always talks about the face of denial. And I had that in my head, that we had to put a face on the denial. It couldn't just be all these gay couples crying and leaving. We felt like it was important in the moment to state, and I felt bad for the clerk, because the last thing he wanted to do was deny us, but he had to put the sign up right in front of us. And we felt, and our son, and you'll see it in the film, he was standing behind us, and that moment when he came forward and held us both and walked up to the counter, that was a coming of age for him. That was an incredibly powerful time for us as a family. And he talks about it in the film. He talks about not always feeling safe as a family, but right in that moment, to watch us be denied as a family when we have this loving, caring connection, was powerful for him. And so that felt important to us as advocates for gay rights. You have to stand up. You have to stand in.
And we didn't plan that.
No.
We didn't plan it. It wasn't like,
Right.
oh, we want to be plaintiffs in this. No, we didn't plan any of this at all. In fact, I was probably a little more reluctant at first. Like, what is this going to involve? And we talked to our son about it. It's like, it's going to be public. When they asked us if we'd be willing to put a face to it, because we were all over the news, there was a lot of reluctance. But then I also felt like, we were the ones that were standing there. And when you feel something like that, it's like, okay. And also the collective team of people that were coming together to actually work on this, if there was not a better time to actually be willing to do this.
Yeah, and I think, when we came back to our house, we had planned a party. We had a wedding cake, we had a catered event, and our friends came back, but nobody quite knew what to do. They didn't even know if they should bring presents in the house or leave them in the car. We didn't know. We didn't cut the cake. Nobody felt like eating a cake. We just watched ourselves on the news. And that moment with our friends and family, we were together that night, holding that space together. And then, this was back in the day of answering machines.
Wait, what's that?
It was this very antique idea. And so after everybody left, the three of us were sitting there, and I said, oh, I should listen to the messages. NCLR, ACLU, Lambda Legal, lawyers, everybody calling saying, will you stay up all night tonight and do your pleadings and be in court tomorrow at 9 a.m.? And we said, we went back as a family. I said, well, we three need to decide, because this is a very out thing. I worked for a nonpartisan breast cancer organization. Pali has a practice. Christopher was at San Francisco State at the time. And we thought, okay, we're going to be very, very out. And as a matter of fact, I asked the board of directors of the organization to convene. Once we decided to do it, I said, you need to know we're going to do this and it could have an impact. And they voted unanimously to support us, because it was a matter also of women's health and rights. And so even if it meant losing donors, we had the full support of the organization. So people really stepped up and were supportive. I mean, it got scary a few times with the protesters and the safety, feeling a bit unsafe, but sure. I mean, that was an interesting dichotomy that we lived with, knowing we had to do it, but also knowing that there were a lot of people who didn't like that we were doing it. So, yeah.
I've never understood people fearing it, or frankly think it was any of their business, to be honest with you. It always surprised me, this whole issue.
Well, you know what's surprising us is that 20 years later, so this case went on for 4 years. We, went to the California Supreme Court. We won. We were able to get married. The cases go on. 20 years later, there are still people that are talking about putting in a constitutional amendment to take it away. It's just like, you think that something has been decided with civil rights, and you realize you can't be complacent. And that's why we really are encouraging the film and for people to see the film, because a lot of young people, especially people in the early 20s, because this was 20 years ago, had no idea what went on in San Francisco and how much we had to really fight for the basic right to marry the person you love. And so when people talk about that, younger people, they just take it for granted. But there's still this effort. You hear here and there some of these people that they want to put in an amendment to make marriage just between a man and a woman. And it's just, you would think after all this, it would be settled.
Well, and the whole trans community is facing it, right? That's now all the, we did a screening at USC, and there are a lot of young students there, had no idea, right? And they're more interested in how they talk about being non-binary or what's happening for trans kids, and realizing that they're up against that. So it comes back and it keeps circling. And so we feel like the film is relevant now, because we're going into another election cycle where there are people, and I think there's like 510 different pieces of legislation in states across this country that will in some way or another oppress LGBTQ plus people. And that is scary that it's come back. And even though we're married, so we could say, well, we're done, we did our part, but it feels like we have to bring it back again and remind everybody that it takes bold elected officials. So your vote matters. Who you vote for determined whether or not someone would take up your issue. So, November's a big voting time. So we think it's important for people to not just say, oh, I'm not so sure about either, whatever. You have to vote. You have to vote for people that hold your values and your morals and your, the integrity of your lives. And so we think the timing is actually very important.
What has changed in your life since the film? I mean, we're talking a couple years, and you guys have had a lot of living to do. Hopefully privately instead of publicly, like when the movie took place. What's it been like since
then? We actually were able to legally get married. So in 2008, we were legally married with now Governor Newsom when he was the mayor. And there's something really profound about that. Especially as you get older, you think about it's marriage is how we recognize families. And so if something had happened to her, she was in the hospital, it's like, I can go, I know I'm her wife. I just say I'm her wife. You know, if something happens, we have better ways of protecting our family and being recognized as a family. And I feel like if we advance this, it makes life better for the younger people and the younger generation, because I feel like for them coming up, I want them to feel like they're accepted and they're valued for exactly how they are. And if they fall in love and want to get married, that should be their right. And if that is what happens, then I'm proud of
Yeah.
what we were able to
And
accomplish.
we're both seniors. I mean, clearly we're both seniors, and Social Security, we own a home together. It changes our economics significantly to be able to be married. Whether everybody believes that that's the way the laws should be, that's the way they are. And so for us to be able to take advantage of that status changes how we buy health insurance or how we transfer property to each other. We're older now, and it becomes really clear that the benefits accrue to us in a different way than if we're not, especially if we're making a life together and we're sharing our resources together.
Right, 35 years later, you're not keeping track of who's, or you know what I mean? It's been a blended life for
Right.
pretty much from the beginning. So the actual have that legal status of marriage is a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
If that's what you want, right?
Not everybody wants to.
And that's okay too. It's just having the free choice to make that decision as a family. And it gave a sense of security and credibility to our family, for our son and for our families. I come from an Italian Catholic family in New York. They were not amused about this. As a matter of fact, when we were finally getting truly married in 2008, my brother was coming out and he said, well, do I give you away, or how does that work? And I was like, no, I'm a little old for that. But the idea that because it was marriage, they welcomed Pali into the family differently than, and they
I had known them for 15 years or longer. But her older cousin, these Italians, they call up and they're like, hey, Paulie, welcome to the family now. It's like, because that's what they recognize. They know that that's how it is. It's like, oh, now I'm welcome to the family.
She'd been to 5 weddings, 4 funerals
every summer, but welcome to the family. Okay.
It gave them permission to love us as a couple. And it gave them something. It was a gift to them because they didn't have to justify their support for us. And I think that changed their lives, and it changed how they deal with their children. One of the, Gavin's staff at the time in City Hall totally embraced this. And there was one of their comms director at the time, a guy named Peter Ragone, who's in the film. Peter didn't have children yet. He now has a 20-year-old gay son. And he came to USC and said, I didn't think it was relevant to me personally at the time, but now it is. And I'm in a much better place with my son than I would have been had I not done this. And that's a powerful moment. And it was powerful for his kids. They came to the USC screening. So I think a lot of people, permission granted to open your hearts, open your minds to this. And so we hope it accomplishes some of that again in this next series of screenings.
Because it's not about marriage. It's really not. This is not about gay marriage. This is about how we see each other and see each other's differences, and homophobia, and some of these sort of hidden or not so hidden, overt ways that people want to keep people down. And so I think that when I realized this isn't just about marriage, this is about so much more than that. And like, again, thinking about the young people that we're paving the way for, if we can make it a little bit easier. I hope that this film, I think because it is real time, it's like a real story. It's real time, live story, scenes that happen. It's very riveting.
And I think the other thing I don't want to fail to mention is the filmmakers, Jeff Callan and Mike Shaw. Jeff Callan is Gavin Newsom's brother-in-law. And Gavin called him the day before and said, come with your cameras, because Jeff and Mike are filmmakers. And I'm about to do something that could ruin my career, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so they have all the behind the scenes footage of Gavin and his team making this decision, navigating it each step of the way, you know, bringing his whole staff together to support this. And that's unique, right? As a documentary filmmaker, to have that kind of access, I think sets this apart from an outside view. It was the inside view. And I think that's part of what makes it compelling, because you really see these elected people that know that their administration is at risk, but they're going to do it anyway.
Because it's the right thing. They knew it's the right
powerful
thing. And I know that one of the things that actually Peter Bergone said at this screening was that he's met a lot of politicians, but nobody quite so courageous as Gavin Newsom and principled. Like he didn't have anything to gain from this. He just believed in it. And it was like before we got married, the month before, the couple that was the first couple to get married had been together over 50 years. And he just felt like this was time. And he was very courageous and bold. And what followed actually, I think, encouraged other people to be more courageous and bold.
And he didn't get a lot of support. And I don't mean just from the other side. I mean, internally, there were other electeds who go, what are you doing? This is this is an election year. We have to be careful. We have to tread lightly.
Too fast.
It's too fast. And now they all came around, right? Everybody came back around. But it takes leadership and it takes integrity. And so, the film is, it certainly talks about his role in this, but it's really the whole story. And I think that comes across about, it was courageous of him to do it in the face of the opposition that he had, not just from the protesters, but even from within the Democratic Party, even from within, other electeds around the country. I mean, George Bush took the opportunity to say it was time for a constitutional amendment. Governor Schwarzenegger went on TV and talked about there were going to be riots and dead people, if we're not careful here. And they were really just pouncing on him, and he never wavered. And it's a model for anyone thinking about going into politics. It's a model, and I think it serves that way as well.
Well, and the trajectory, because you win some and you lose some, in any civil rights battle, like you make some leaps and then you're kind of stymied. So this whole thing that to make marriage legal across the country took a whole other, more until 2013. We weren't part of those cases, but we got it as far as we could in California. And then it still took more years in order for the whole country to actually finally have gay marriages legal.
On a federal level, because after we were able to get married, we were legally married in California, but not federally. So we had two separate tax returns, joint return for California, separate returns for the feds. I thought we got to fix that, because that was really annoying.
That's a whole other story.
But, but then they took it, it was like, wait a minute. So we went on a trip to Italy or something after we were legally married in California, and we were going through customs. They're like, no, you're not married. Two separate lines, right? You're not coming through as a married couple, because it wasn't federally recognized yet. So it took until 13, 14, 15, for everything to really smooth out. But it did. And it shows that it can. And I really hope that people take that from the film, that issues that are important to them, social justice, environmental justice, economic justice, whatever the issue is that moves you, keep working on it, because you can win.
What kind of feedback have you got from people you run into and when they see you out and recognize you?
Oh, it's wonderful. You're that couple, right? Are you the girls? I mean, there's a little less recognition now, I will say, as we've
It
gotten
has, it
older
hasn't,
and
well, it also
got gray
hasn't,
hair.
this film hasn't been really in circulation for 20 years,
Right.
you know?
But
and-
there's still people that know us from being on the cover
Right.
of USA Today. And I think the local paper, there's a picture, and I'm crying because I cry. I'm Italian, I cry. She was steel. She was great. I was sobbing. And so we're on the cover of every newspaper, left at the altar, that kind of thing. So people will see us and say, "You're that couple, right?" And it's positive, but probably the circles that we're in, tend to. But the screenings that we did with the film back then and have done since then in this 20-year tour have been amazing. The emotion that people feel when they watch it and realize, where was I when that was happening? I didn't do anything. I didn't know about it, or I knew you were together, but I didn't know it was like that. So it reminds people of what it takes to make real change.
And the filmmakers, Mike and
Oh my
Jeff,
God,
two
they're
straight
amazing.
guys, that were walking around City Hall just filming all this stuff. But it was really when they showed us some footage they had, and they said, "Would you guys be willing to be part of this?" Because they were shooting just people they didn't know, but they were shooting the back scenes and all that. And so we met with them, and they came over, and it was really when they spent some time with our son and talked with them, and the three of them were in a room together for a long time. It was like, we're looking like, God, what are they doing? But they came out, and the three of them had tears in their eyes. And I could tell that I knew we could work with these guys, because it wasn't just a sound bite. They actually wanted to feel the real people's story. And they caught that with Christopher. It's really quite beautiful. And so they do a really, it's an amazing job with the film, of like the riveting, footage from City Hall to personal stories to, all the different legal things that came up. I mean, it's riveting for 20 years later.
Right.
It still has
And
some power.
they even went to Philadelphia to film the leaders of the protests.
The
religious Jesus people who were blocking the people at City Hall. They had to be arrested. They were keeping the couples from going into the clerk's office, and they caught that. They got all that, and then they went and they interviewed the leader of those protests, and it's a really powerful moment, because it sounds like what we're hearing today. You could just listen with the camera off and say that could be today. That's why that's why this is important. We were thinking about this, and I was like, this was 20 years ago, but you know what? When I hear some of this rhetoric, it's not just rhetoric, though. They actually want to advance some of these things. It's really important that we keep this in the conversation, because we can't take any of these things for granted. We really can't, especially today.
And this is going to be my last question. Maybe it's a silly question, but has any screenwriters approached you about telling your story in a feature film? Because it sounds like such a great, it's just a great story, and just to kind of focus on you two as a couple. You guys are a remarkable couple. Has anyone approached you about a story like that?
No, just those filmmakers.
Just those guys.
Just those?
I mean, once you see the film, there's quite a bit of us in it. Not our whole story, because we obviously, like anyone, there's more to our story than is in there. We've had a couple of people call and say, "Wow, we should now talk about what's happened in the 20 years since then, and what the world is like, what your life is like." And we're open to that. But Jeff and Mike really want to do a 2.0, because the film itself ended in 2005, right? And then they have a few cards that come up where what happened after, and they filmed Gavin at the Castro screening, where he talked about what's happened in the last 20 years. So I think, and when you see the film, there are people interested in doing a curriculum for colleges based on the film. That really,
not so much about us,
not so much about us, but about the whole issue. And they're very interested in our son, who now is right on the edge of his PhD in clinical psychology.
Wow,
He's
congratulations.
wonderful. He's a wonderful guy. And he came to the screening and everybody fell in love with him. You'll fall in love with him. He's someone to fall in love with. He's just this gentle soul, but clear about what that was like for him growing up, not feeling like he could be forthright or safe, and then watching us be denied and then standing up with us.
Well, because he said, he goes, look, I am a straight guy. I could go to Las Vegas right now and get married, get drunk, get married. The next day, get it annulled. Here's two people who have been together for 15 years at the time and they can't get married. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So you can see how absurd some of these things were, but publicly.
So we feel it's our honor, our responsibility, and our privilege to help advance this. Anything that we can do that makes that next generation or people living still in the closet, right? That if we can help advance that and teach these young people to take this very seriously, it's more than just a minute. And I think that's what full documentaries and AmDoc and other film festivals provide an opportunity for people to really sit with it. It's not 30 seconds, right? It's an hour plus where you're really consuming the issue. So I think that's the power of documentary filmmaking. I was involved in making a film about women who, producing a film about women who climb Mount McKinley for breast cancer. Oh. And so I know the power that had. And so it made me even that much more interested in being part of this film.
Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you so
running
much.
out of time. I
hope we get
apologize.
to
I
meet
wish we
you
had more
down
time to
south.
talk. I think I
I
could go
know.
on.
Will we see you? Will we see you down there?
You will see me there at the festival. So before I go, let me give an outro. The American Documentary and Animation Film Festival is March 21st to 25th at the Palm Springs Cultural Center. Tickets are going fast. Sean Penn is sold out, but we have tickets available here for the pursuit of equality, but move quickly because they're going to go quickly and get a chance to meet both of these wonderful women and heroes to a lot of people. So thank you both very much for your time, and we will see you in Palm Springs. Thank you very much.
We're looking forward. Thanks, Leighton. Bye-bye.